of separation between church and state. Sure, but it's not the wall you've been told.
I have sworn upon the altar of God eternal hostility against every form of tyranny over the mind of man. They who can give up essential liberty to obtain a little temporary safety deserve neither liberty nor safety. Rebellion to tyrants is obedience to God.
We bled in the fields, we froze in the snow, no shoes on our feet.
So welcome back to the Modern Patriot Podcast. I'm your host, John Teigen, where the truth gets the mic, the founders get the respect they deserve, and the modern warrior gets our marching orders. This is episode 2, Faith and Freedom, the Wall That Wasn't. So the last episode, I went over, talking about our roots of our nation, what we stand on. Obviously, there's a lot more to it, but again, otherwise I'd be here for 24 days trying to get everything together. But today we're going after one of the most abused phrases in American politics: the separation of church and state. So now let's dig into what the founders actually meant, how it's been twisted, why churches have always been part of our civic life, and how the states themselves handle religion long after the Constitution was signed. So by the end, you'll know the facts, the history, and you'll have the ammo to push back when someone tries to erase faith from the public life. I'm no Bible thumper, don't get me wrong. I've always believed in God and Jesus. And again, we need to maintain the foundation of our nation. I really don't care what people say. Again, I'm never going to stand by and let a lie go unchallenged. I'm just not. So this first segment, we're going to jump right into the separation of church and state and what it really meant. So the first thing we got to do, the myth, the big, huge liberal myth. The Constitution demands a total separation of religion from public life. Keep faith out of politics and public spaces. So the phrase isn't whatsoever in the Constitution. Nowhere in the Constitution or the Bill of Rights does the phrase separation of church and state appear. What the First Amendment does say, because this is where they always try to say it as well, Congress shall make no law except an establishment of religion. So let's say that again. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting free exercise thereof. That means two things side by side. No national church like the Church of England, no government power to stop individuals or communities from practicing their faith. That is what that is what the First Amendment means. That's the whole purpose of that portion besides the free speech stuff. But Congress, again, shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion. Again, that's Congress. Keep that in mind. Congress. So where the phrase actually came from, of the separation. So the words came from Thomas Jefferson, 1802, a letter to the Danbury Baptist Association in Connecticut. If you didn't know, the Danbury Baptists were worried that the federal government might one day impose a national denomination, just as the English crown had forced the church. So Jefferson wrote back to calm them down, saying the First Amendment has erected a wall of separation between church and state. So there's that wall. So his meaning, the federal government had no jurisdiction over religious exercise. That is the wall. That is there to protect the church from the government, not the government from the church. So not to subscribe faith from public life. Not to scrub faith from public life. This is why I write things down. Anyways, how Jefferson actually governed. So this is Jefferson, the guy who wrote the letters that everybody tried to use for the separation. Jefferson attended religious service in the U.S. Capitol itself, so inside the Capitol of the United States of America. He approved of using federal buildings for worship. Oh, my goodness. So he also signed treaties that support religious liberties, not suppression. So if he had meant this wall as a ban on religion in public life, his action as president would make no sense whatsoever. So our founders on religion and government, George Washington's farewell address. Of all the dispositions and habits which lead to political prosperity, Religion and morality are indisputable supports. That was 1796, well after 1776. John Adams, our Constitution was made only for moral and religious people. It is wholly inadequate to the government of any other. Whoever heard that one before? And again, I said this one, the last one, the Northwest Ordinance, 1787, Article 3, religion, morality, and knowledge being necessary to good government and the happiness of mankind. Schools and the means of education shall forever be encouraged. Interesting. How smart our founders were. So these weren't just side notes again, people. The founders saw religion and morality as the guardrails of self-government. It's literally the rudder of our country. So, and I'm going to stay on track here. So you guys ain't on here for 5 hours with me. So early American practice. So congressional chaplains, 1789, the very first Congress, the same one that wrote the First Amendment, voted to appoint chaplains to open session with prayer. Oh my goodness, there goes the whole separation of church and state freaking mindset. Presidential oh my goodness, you guys know what I'm talking about. Anyways, presidential proclamations. Geez, me Christmas. English is not my favorite subject. So Washington, Adams, and later president issued days of prayer, fasting, and thanksgiving. Public schools in the 1700s, the Bible was the main school book. Children learned to read from the Psalms and Proverbs. If the founders had intended to ban religion from public life, none of this would have been possible, yet it was standard practice. Again, I'm giving you the fuel to fight back, people. If you're taking notes, take notes. If you can remember it, remember it. I couldn't remember. That's why it's written down. I mean, I get the gist of it. But anyways, so how the courts finally twisted it, how the liberal judges that got put into office thanks to communism, because we kind of let down our guard, which again, it's going to take a long time to get America back to its founding. So for the first 150 years after ratification, the courts never used such thing of a separation of church and state to strike down religious practice. That change happened in Engel. I talked about it last time. Engel versus Vidal, 1962 is when our country started really taking a nosedive to the shitter. When the Supreme Court ruled voluntary school prayer was unconstitutional. Voluntary school prayer, not involuntary, people, voluntary. Citing the wall idea. From then on, the phrase has been used to remove prayer, the Ten Commandments display, and even crosses, memorials, none of which the founders ever envisioned. So they're erasing the American history so they can, again, I can't go off. The real meaning of Jefferson's wall. The founders feared government control of religion, like Europe, like where a lot of the pilgrims were running from. So the citizens living out their faith. Jefferson's wall was a one-way barrier. Government cannot force or control religion, but religion may and must guide the moral compass of the nation. It's everywhere in our founders. Today's interpretation flips that on its head. And we've seen it. If you're not paying attention, you better start. Hopefully this opens your eyeballs. Government bans faith in public spaces, which is exactly what Jefferson and Danbury Baptist feared. This is what they feared. This is that letter between Jefferson and the whole separation of church and state. They feared that what's happening is happening. You guys understand that? At its core, this is what they did not want. So, think of it like a fortress wall. Jefferson built the wall to keep government soldiers out of the church, not to lock the church inside or out of government. Now, just remember, listen to how Jefferson framed the First Amendment, not as a shutdown of faith, but as its greatest protector. So he wrote the Danbury Baptist in 1802, believing with you that religion is a matter which lies solely between man and his God, that he owns account to none other for his faith or his worship, thus building a wall of separation between church and state. It's not exiling religion. It's about protecting private faith from public government interference. That is the original intent. Jefferson's earlier work, the Virginia Statute for Religious Freedom, 1786, one of the most foundational achievements. Almighty God hath created the mind free. All attempts to influence it by temporal punishment are a departure from the plan of the holy author of our religion. This emphasizes Jefferson's consistent belief that religious belief must remain voluntary to be authentic, not coerced by the state. So, hopefully you guys can get that and use it. Again, do not let these lies go unchallenged.
American military families' journey began with a singular mission: to support veterans grappling with PTSD and suicidal thoughts. This compassionate and determined initiative has evolved into a charity that has touched countless lives. The dedicated team of AMF has paved a path of hope and recovery, placing boots on the ground to personally reach out to struggling veterans before it is too late. Their approach encompasses everything from community meetings to one-on-one therapy sessions and interventions, creating a lifeline for those in dire need. This hands-on method has proved successful, offering a safety net for numerous veterans. Over the years, AMF has organized events to raise both funds and awareness, showcasing the critical role each of us can play in this mission. As they celebrate 2 decades of life-saving work, they invite everyone to join a special event on July 12th. This milestone commemorates 20 years of dedication, underscoring the importance of supporting veterans and their families. It serves as a celebration of life, hope, and the unwavering spirit of those who have served. Join in this significant occasion, honoring the past and inspiring the future.
Churches can't be involved in politics without breaking the law. That is a major myth. And it's actually, I kind of added this one in just because of the Colorado Springs mayor, Mayor Yemi Mobilati. Again, some kind of foreigner dude, obviously doesn't know the true history of America. Is pretty much telling the pulpit to stay out of politics, which, again, I think that we're in this situation now because churches have stayed out. They haven't been vocal for decades in our politics. So the truth is, in colonial and revolutionary America, the pulpit was political. The pulpit is a church, if you don't know. So ministries preached about liberty, tyranny, and the moral duty to resist opposition. The British officials called them the Black-Robed Regiment because many pastors wore black clerical robes while preaching for independence. So again, this just how we said the pulpit should not be involved. It wasn't for them teaching I'm going off ranting again, but it wasn't for them. We wouldn't be where we are now. We'd probably be still under British rule. We'd still have probably slavery across this country, probably across the world. But anyways, so Jonathan Mayhew, 1750, delivered a sermon defending the rights to resist tyrannical rulers, laying theological groundwork for the revolution. 1750. Was that 26 years before our independence? John Witherspoon, Presbyterian minister, president of Princeton, which Princeton now is a shithole of indoctrination libtardism, was one of the signers, again, the president of Princeton, a signer of the Declaration of Independence. I bet you guys from Princeton don't even know this crap. Preached the famous 1776 sermon, The Dominion of Providence over the Passion of Men, urging unity and resolve. So this is what it was. It's kind of abbreviated. It's not the exact whole thing, but on May 17, 1776, Princeton President John Witherspoon, the only pastor who signed the Declaration, preached one of the most important political sermons of the Revolution. So there is not a greater evidence that firm belief of God's universal presence, even so the most I'm not even going to try it, impetuous and disorderly passion of men and yet perfectly subject to the domination of Jehovah. It reminds us everything, even human emotion, was under God's hand. Then he turned political. If your cause is just, you may look with confidence to the Lord and entreat him to plead it as his own. The cause in which America is now in arms is the cause of justice, of liberty, and of human nature. That was passive patriotism. That wasn't just, that was preaching conviction. Again, Witherspoon wasn't preaching from the pulpit. He was speaking the language of the heart of the revolution. And that's where we need a lot of our politicians to get back to. So election sermons in New England, ministers address legislators directly on matters of governance, law, and justice. Major movements, impact of major movements. The church and pastors were at the forefront of the anti-slavery movement. In Detroit, Reverend Franklin, often called the preacher with the $1 million voice. I definitely don't have his voice, but did more than lead worship. He stood on the helm of the largest civil rights march before Salem, serving as the SCLC. I kind of forgot what that meant. Sorry, guys. But rallying crowds from the New Bethel pulpit. His sermons were recorded and broadcasted across America, making him a key voice of the movement. In Atlanta, Dr. Samuel Williams, he's got a long name, Samuel Woodrow Williams Morehouse, professor, pastor, and co-founder of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. Sorry, that's what the SCLC stands for, the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. Led legal fights and grassroots protest. His dual role as educator and minister made him the bridge between faith and civic justice. Modern law, the Johnson Amendment. Again, this is where churches kind of also started losing their way, and this is how I believe also in 1962 they were able to do what they did to remove moral guidelines for our nation from schools and everywhere else. So the Johnson Amendment, 1954. Why did the First Amendment violation happen? So I'm going to break it down. Johnson's Amendment, the law buried in the tax code of 1954 that bars churches and nonprofits from endorsing or opposing political candidates unless they want to sacrifice their tax exempt. Here's what actually happened. If you guys don't know, again, the more you know, the more you can fight back with. So the amendment was authored by Senator Lyndon Johnson at the time, not as a crackdown on religion, but as a political tool to silence lobbying groups targeting him. So he had a personal vendetta because two churches were going after him. So there's no hearing, no debate. It was a fast-tracked into a revenue bill via voice vote, nothing more. So the law prohibits any campaign participation, and if violated, even accidentally, a church or charity can lose its tax-exempt privileges. Now, bear with me. I'll get into everything else. Nobody ever put churches in the crosshairs, but they got swept up because of the amendment sits in the exact same tax section. Yet just the threat of losing status stopped pastors from speaking freely, the ultimate gag order. Enforcement is uneven and vague. Some groups face investigations, others didn't, leading the claims of political bias. Where do we see that? Kind of seems like maybe the Tea Party still. I mean, again, we're. So as of 2024, the IRS finally agreed that talking to your own congregation about moral issues, even politics, doesn't count as campaigning. But enforcement standards still remain unclear. So there's still that freaking gray area. So be very careful. You live in these liberal, democratic, Nazi control camp cities. So this isn't a constitutional amendment. It's a tax net. It's a tax catch net is what it is. It wasn't about protecting separation of church and state. It was about protecting Johnson's political standing and a lot of these libtard freaking Democrat standings. And it's quietly trapping, and it actually wasn't quietly, it's loudly trapping pastors in a cage of silence. But there are some that are waking up. So let's clear the air. Traditionally, churches couldn't endorse candidates or campaigns, but that was Johnson's amendment. So they could back in the day. They could do it, and they kind of did it, but just not really openly. So the update from the 2025 IRS officially said that if a pastor gives a sermon during worship service or sends notes through the usual church channels endorsing a candidate, that is no longer enforcement worthy. It's like a private family talk, not a billboard. Everything else, though, is still kind of off limits. I guess they're not supposed to be able to donate to, no campaign donation. Doesn't mean the pulpit can. The people, no fundraising, no sneaky candidate endorsements. But again, I'll read it right through it again. The IRS officially said that if a pastor gives a sermon during worship service or sends notes through the usual church channels endorsing a candidate, that is no longer enforcement worthy. So technically, they can still endorse a candidate. If they like them, they can send it through normal notes, through usual channels. Again, they can talk about them during the service, during worship time. So what can you do now? You can speak boldly from your pulpit for a candidate, but within the worship. So again, during that time of worship, provide nonpartisan voter information forms and registration, preach on moral and political issues, even lobby, but just be careful, but always be cautious. Legal experts warn this new policy could blur the lines and leave churches vulnerable in the future. You pastors got to be ballsy. You got to wake up. And if your church is just cowardice, you're in the wrong church. Sorry, find a church that has the balls, has the courage to stand up to this immorality that's been going on in our nation. We've lost our way. We got to find it back. Again, I'm not a Bible thumper. They do. I don't care what people say. That moral guidance got us to where we were. It started going downhill after a Democrat, Johnson, and then again in the 60s because of Democrats. So it's going to take a lot to fight back, because if it started back in the 50s, we're already looking at 70 plus years that it took to get us where we are, and it's going to probably take us another 100 years to get back to where we were. So the founders saw churches as guardians of public morality. Silencing churches removed key checks on government overreach and corruption. I love it. Again, just another reminder, John Adams, our Constitution was made only for moral and religious people. It is wholly inadequate to a government of any other. Where do you see we're at now? Where do you see what's going on in D.C.? Where do you see, just with all these politicians going across our nation, all the lies, all the cheat, the corruption within them. They're in there for life. We don't need lifelong politicians. Get in there, do your crap, and get out.
Welcome home, warriors. What a firefight. 13 hours holding fast through the night, while they sat in shadows hidden from the fray. We fought, we bled, we led the way. Coffee coaster reward, that was our praise for a 13-hour stand and the lives we tried to save. But we still stood tall, remembering their names. Debriefed in Tripoli, shipped to Germany. Our warriors welcomed home, we watched from afar. Silence louder than the mortar fire. One quick breath before DC. Tickets home, bought on our own. One last debrief before going home.
The myth. The founders intended religion to be removed from all government at every level. Separation in the states. How the founders left religion in the local hands. So, the truth. The First Amendment restricted only the federal government when ratified. It begins with Congress shall make no law, not no government. Many states maintain official churches or religious tests for office well after 1791. Massachusetts had an official state church until 1833. Connecticut maintained Congregationalism as its established religion until 1818. Several state constitutions require belief in God or the Bible to hold office. So to sit there and say our founders wanted the separation of church and state, oh my goodness, Becky. So state and local governments routinely, Christmas. Yeah, you know what I'm trying to say. Incorporated prayer, Bible readings, and religious instructions in schools. So here's what's wild. Right after the Revolution, nearly every state religious qualification for public office had a religious qualification for public office. Nearly every state. In Delaware, 1776, you had to profess your faith to the Trinity and Scripture. Maryland and Georgia barred anyone not Christian. South Carolina did the same thing, but the U.S. Constitution banned religious tests for office holders. Article 6 says you can't hold public trust based on religion. In a way, I disagree, but yes, I do agree too. Some folks at the ratifying convention literally feared that non-Christians would fill public office, but America rejected that. What do we have here? What's going on with a lot of these Muslims that are being elected into our office and their outward look on America, especially these first generation ones, again, weren't even born here, weren't even raised here, came here in asylum seeking bullcrap, and they literally hate this freaking country. Anyways, there's some American born ones too that are not even Muslims. I'm not just saying that, but again, it is something that could potentially destroy this country if nothing but other than Christians get into politics, which hopefully churches start waking up, finding people within their pulpit to actually push into politics. But still the states lagged. Maryland turned the Jew bill in 1826 to let Jewish citizens serve in public roles. And get this, some states still have wording banning atheists from office today. They can't enforce it, but go look. Again, look up what your state has. In 1997, the South Carolina Supreme Court threw out their religious test. 1997 threw out their religious test in the Silverman versus Campbell. And it all began with in the 1961 Supreme Court case, Tarasco versus Watkins, which officially made all these tests unconstitutional. Kind of disagree. I think we need to bring it back, especially the moral guidance. But so why does this matter? Because some people still think faith is required to serve, but it's not. I think it kind of should. I think it should be. I think you should have faith to actually serve as a politician, not a leader. You're a politician. But anyways, our founders banned religious tests at the federal level. It took nearly 200 years. Sorry, I think I got that wrong how I wrote it, but it took nearly 200 years to clean up state laws. So at the federal level they banned it, but local, again, they gave that's what it was. Sorry guys. They kind of again let the states do their own thing, which again it says in there, Congress shall not. So that's kind of where it came from. So when did things start to change? At the founding, the First Amendment only limited Congress. It did not touch the states. That's why Massachusetts still had an official state church until 1833. States could decide for themselves how much religion mixed with government. Then came the 14th Amendment. We all know about this one, I hope. In 1868, right after the Civil War, its purpose was to protect free slaves and guarantee them equal rights. But courts later used it to say, hey, the Bill of Rights now applies to the states too, not just Congress. The process is called incorporation. Fast forward to 1947, Jefferson versus Board of Education. For the first time, the Supreme Court said the Establishment Clause, the no national church part of the First Amendment, also limits states and local governments. And they quoted Jefferson's Wall of Separation letter to justify it, which, again, they shouldn't because it has nothing to do with it. That's when the phrase officially became law, even though it's not in the Constitution. Why does this matter? It proves that at the founding, religion in public life wasn't seen as a violation of the Constitution. It also shows the founders trusted local self-rule. Each state and town could balance faith and governance how they wanted. I think we need to get back to that. Only much later, after the Civil Rights War, and especially in the mid-1900s, did courts expand the federal government's reach into this area, which, again, as states, we need to push back and fight back and tell them get the hell out of our lives. The federal government doesn't need to be in this area. It's up to the individuals that live in those towns, those cities, those states, in my opinion. So here's the key. The founders built a system where Washington couldn't touch your faith, but your local community could still pray at schools or even support a state church if they wanted. That changed after the Civil War with the 14th Amendment, and by 1947, the Supreme Court said, nope, states are under the same restrictions as Congress. That's when Jefferson's wall got dragged into the courtroom and turned into something the founders never designed it to be. George Washington's farewell address, of all the dispositions and habits which led to political prosperity, religion and morality are indispensable supports. Hope that helps you guys. My email is on the website, so if you want more, just let me know. I'm finding things and I think it's good. So here's my little practical Patriot skills for the week. So lock it in. Memorize 2 religion clauses of the First Amendment. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. You can't quote it. You can't defend it. So again, memorize it. Don't let a lie go on challenge. Check your own backyard. Pull up your state's constitution online and read the section of religion. Some states may still have the old language requiring belief in God for office, even if it's unenforceable. Know what's on your books. Again, see it for yourself. Attend or stream one local public meeting this week, a city council, school board, county commissioners. That one is boring as hell. I've watched a couple of them. But watch how prayer, the pledge, or religious references are handled. Are they respected or ignored, or are they actually attacked? So again, just little things. You can do all 3. You can just do one, or again, you can do none. But I'll be right back for the final segment. All right, here we go. All right, Warriors, time for Tig's tip. This week, it's all about situational awareness. Forget theory. This one, you can train every single day by yourself, with your family, with your friends. So I try to break this stuff down so it's fairly easy. It's going to be fairly quick stuff. All my Tig tips, it's not like the other stuff. It's just whatever. So skill of the week, situational awareness drill. Pick a person. No, don't pick on your wife. It's out in public. So when you're out in public, let's say a gas station, a restaurant, probably something, you might be in like a store. But again, pick one stranger, give yourself, about 10 seconds to memorize everything you can about them, their clothing, their build, their hair, their shoes, backpack, tattoos, jewelry, whatever you can possibly just look them up and down, 10 seconds. They stare back, just make good googly eyes at them and blow them a kiss. I don't know, do something or not. I don't know. Maybe you get married to them. I don't know. Anyways, so this is going to, look away, wait a few minutes, and then test yourself. Describe them in detail out loud or on paper. This will help stimulate the memory recall under stress. So that's kind of what this does. It just kind of helps your brain to start remembering things quickly and fast. Because, again, you can't really train all the time for stressful situations, but this also helps you identify people very quickly. It works over time. It ain't gonna happen one day. Again, some people do have really good memories. I get it, but if you don't, this is a good skill. So the same skill you'll need if you ever have to report a suspect or protect your family. That's kind of what it does. It just starts helping your brain remember things. Just be aware of your surroundings. So make it a game with your kids or spouse. What color was the cashier's shirt? Which door was closest to us? This kind of helps train them without fear, and it builds habit as a unit. You just kind of walk in, maybe prep them beforehand, but they'll slowly start getting it, So if they get it correct, give them $1. I don't know. Don't give them candy bars, then you're going to have diabetes on your hand. But so why this matters, again, this is just helpful stuff. Under adrenaline, your memory will fail if it's not trained. Practice recall now makes your eyes sharper, your mind quicker, and your family safer. So why does this matter? Why am I teaching you situational awareness? Because freedom and faith both demand awareness. If you walk through life blind, you miss the threats. If you live without memory, you forget the truth. And that's how a nation drifts. And that's how a nation falls. So they've tried to wall off faith from public life, not to protect the church from the state, but to protect the state from the church. Know the difference and never let them get away with the lie. That's why this is so important. I'm going to leave you with the scripture. This is Matthew 5:14. You are the light of the world. A city set on a hill cannot be hidden. God, give us the strength to speak truth in public, to stand with others, to stand when others kneel to lies, and to defend the faith that has always been part of our nation's life. In Jesus' name, amen. So there we go. Episode 1, I try to give us the roots of our nation. And now episode 2, kind of give you a little bit of strength to defend the sunlight, the freedom of those roots to grow in faith and truth. So next time we'll pull apart another lie about our foundation and rebuild with facts and history. So this is the Modern Patriot, and I'm your host, John Teigen. Never let a lie go unchallenged, and always move forward.
This is the ground God has given. This is our ground forged by pain, by the blood of the lost and the weight of the chains. We fight, we build, we don't bow down. This is our soul, this is our sound. Through ash and echo we carry the flame. This is our ground. Brothers met brothers on opposite lines. The flag torn in half, soaked in rivers of time. From Gettysburg Hills to freedom's last flame, we rose from the